You can now get a 30-day trial to experience The Athletic for free. Visit the link in the description below to try it now.
Hello, I'm Alex. I'm an analyst at Tifo. Today we're going to talk about Tottenham Hotspur. Under Antonio Conte, Spurs have now won 3 of their 4 games. They also have kept a number of clean sheets, 3, which is pretty impressive stuff. This is the lineup that they used against Brentford in that 2-0 win, and the only difference from this to the 3-0 win against Norwich was that we had Japhet Tanganga here instead of Emerson Royale. But this is pretty much what we can safely assume is Antonio Conte's first choice lineup currently. Obviously, the absence of Romero there is a problem in this back line, but injuries notwithstanding, this is the kind of team that Conte wants to put out. Now, how has he got the team playing? Well, it's actually fairly straightforward. And there's a good thing with Conte, which is that because of how he's coached teams in this back 3 system for a while now, it's relatively straightforward to understand the kinds of patterns that Spurs are trying to achieve and are in fact achieving with relative success. So let's have a quick look at what that looks like in build-up. So what we have here is a back 3. Wing backs are in this area. We have a relatively tight midfield double pivot, although Skip just jumped over there for some reason. And then we have this front 3 here with Harry Kane kind of leading the line and looking to push up into these sorts of areas. Song and Lucas Moura occupying more like half spaces, but with the ability to drift out wide. When Spurs are looking to build up from the back, we know that Conte is a kind of press and possess style of manager, so you expect that the ball is circulated between these backline players here. Let's get some arrows going to make it nice and clear. And then one of these guys, usually just one, whether it's Højbjerg or Skip, will drop into this sort of space here. Sometimes it'll be more into this kind of position as if they're one of the defenders, and then a defender will push wide. And you get this kind of fairly standard build-up pattern. So what does it look like? Well, let's push Højbjerg up a little bit here. Dyer will drop off, Sanchez and Davies will spring out into these wide areas, and then you get this nice kind of rhombus shape here with Lloris an option. And that gives Spurs the opportunity to pull the opposition team forward into pressing positions while having plenty of passing options here. Dynamism in the wide areas, as we know, comes from the wing-backs who are looking to express themselves in these sorts of parts of the pitch, get round the outside and try and create crossing opportunities, but also act as an option here to create little passing triangles in the half and wide spaces to allow Spurs again to rotate the ball and create this movement, dragging the opposition forwards, and that will open up space on the far side for switch passes, whether it's to Reguilón here or to Son here, for example. Højbjerg also will be looking to push up into this kind of area. Conte likes his central midfielders to be able to express themselves, particularly pushing up into the half spaces, so maybe he'll come across here and be one of these players occupying in this triangle here, and also making late runs into the box, and that allows Spurs also to set their defensive line relatively high up the pitch and try and start to press and win the ball back in attacking areas that allows them to transition quickly into attack. Another couple of things that are worth noting is the role, I think, here of Ben Davies. So Davies was a player that we highlighted way back when we looked at Conte coming to Spurs, and suggested that maybe Davies would have quite an important role in this system as the outside centre-back in a back 3 on the left-hand side. And this is something that we've seen other managers do as well, deploying fullbacks who are maybe slightly taller and more secure in the air as the outside centre-back on one particular side. And it is often the left-hand side, because teams do like to stack the left-hand side and get their attacking options there. So Davies will often pull a little bit wider here, a slightly errant arrow there. That obviously allows Reguilón, who is the more aggressive of the wing backs, to get into this sort of position further up the pitch. And then Davies himself can push up here, and if Son is maybe attacking these channels more, you can create a kind of second line of attack here, where you've got a front 3 or 4 or even 5, and then Davies and Højbjerg are creating this kind of lopsided balance on the left-hand side that allows Spurs to get players here, with Sanchez and Dyer and Skip kind of holding the fort. Davies will also look to make underlapping runs, So if there's space that's created maybe by Reguilon pulling this defender here and Son pinning this defender here, that clears an avenue for Davies to really push up and aggressively attack this kind of area. That gives teams a lot of issues to deal with because Spurs have this ability in that front three to create plenty of movement and rotation. Lucas Moura is dropping centrally and carrying the ball forwards, and that opens space for someone like Davies to make these kinds of runs. At the top of the pitch, we have the kinds of movements that you'd expect. Let's move Davies back into more of an orthodox position here. So with the wing backs expressing themselves in the wide areas like this, Son and Moura will occupy these sorts of half spaces, and that allows Kane to play up here. But obviously you also have the option of Kane dropping off and looking to feed passes through to those players, making the kinds of runs that you expect. It's not necessarily a throwback to what Mourinho was doing, but it's very, very understandable when Kane is such a good creative player in that 10 space and is able to drop off and link. And what that means is that Spurs can be pushing 2 or 1 player up at the same time, and you have this option of somebody sitting back in the pocket and spraying passes around. Sometimes that'll be Højbjerg pushing a little further up and Kane and Son will be up, with Moura drifting in from the side. Sometimes it's Kane playing at the front and Son drifting off. Basically, Spurs have options in this area because they have, particularly in Son and Kane, they have 2 very intelligent players who are used to working in tandem and are able to exploit the space that the other creates. So that's kind of how Spurs are trying to play, and what's been interesting is that particularly against Brentford and Norwich, also going right back to that 3-2 win against Vitesse Arnhem when they scored that very, very kind of training ground goal, you can see aspects of what Antonio Conte is trying to bring in here. Spurs are not the finished article, and I think the reason for that is that they have, I don't want to call it a talent deficiency, but there are areas of the pitch obviously where there could be upgrades, players that maybe will facilitate this more. So if we highlight a couple of those, perhaps Emerson Royal here on the right-hand side, they could do with a wing-back who's more dynamic, more attacking. You know, Antonio Conte's last right wing-back was Achraf Hakimi at Inter, and so Emerson Royal is a little bit of a step down. Reguilon's actually done really well on that left-hand side, so I think we can say that that's fine. This midfield pivot balance maybe is slightly lacking. It's really interesting to see Oliver Skipp starting to develop into the kind of player that Conte can see as that more holding midfield role, and potentially what that'll do is it'll allow Højbjerg to push up and be more of the player that we've seen for Denmark than we've seen recently for Spurs, although it is worth noting, as producer Don pointed out to me before we recorded this video, the man is knackered. He has played something like 50-51 Premier League games in a row, and obviously that affects his dynamism. Now, again, Conte at Inter had someone like Nicolo Barella in that position who was really adept at attacking those half spaces, getting forwards into the box. We haven't seen that from Højbjerg. Partly that's because he needs to have the shackles released a little bit by having trust in Skipp playing alongside him, but also the man probably just needs a rest. This backline also, I think, could probably do with a little bit. The absence of Romero means that Spurs will find it slightly harder to dominate this central area. Romero really excelled for Atalanta at stepping forwards, aggressively attacking that space, pushing opposition centre forwards back and dominating aerially there. Eric Dyer's not going to do that same kind of thing, although there is a security in his passing from the back. But when Romero comes back in, I think we will see Spurs being able to adopt a slightly higher and more aggressive line. That gives Lloris a little bit more scope to sweep in behind. And we know that Lloris is not bad with his distribution, and that will basically allow Spurs to push further up the pitch and try and get that kind of really engaged pressing going from the front. I think what's key here with Antonio Conte is that he is a world-class manager. Obviously, he's achieved success pretty much everywhere he's been, and it is very obvious how Spurs are starting to adapt under him. It's been a pretty quick transition, but I don't think you can ascribe it just to new manager bounce, because some of these patterns are things that we have seen Conte do consistently in his coaching career to great effect, and Spurs are starting to take some of those on. They will need some investment, and I think in the summer we'll probably see Conte look to invest in the squad, particularly at right back, maybe in central midfield, maybe somebody to come in for Lucas Moura and add a bit more creativity and flair on that right-hand side. So Spurs are a work in progress, but they are definitely heading in the right direction. And whether that will then push them forwards into that kind of top 4, top 5 battle with more security, we'll have to wait and see.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Daniel Taylor, Ollie Kay, Amy Lawrence and Rafa Honigstein. There are journalists dedicated to each Premier League team, so every fan gets the coverage they deserve, not just the big clubs. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.